Okay, folks, about time to get started. This is Bob Coppedge, Simplex-IT, and got Doug Tombo here. And we are going to have about a half-hour session of talking about introduction to database performance. And this is interactive, although we did mute you all. So if you're interested in adding something, just go ahead and use the chat window. This will be up on YouTube probably by the end of the week, and if you registered, you'll get an email telling you how to get to it and all that kind of fun stuff. And I will also say we will give away a copy of Office 2013 Professional to some lucky person, and we'll figure out how we're going to do that as we go through. So, okay. And what we got here, first of all, we have our NASCAR slide, which we're finally just calling it. These are the Simplex-IT. For those of you who are not aware, we are the IT department, CIO, whatever you want to call it, for a number of small, medium businesses, actually mostly in Northeast Ohio, but we've got some in Florida, and they don't send us down there, though, which I am very upset by. Anyway, we've won a bunch of awards. We've got a bunch of good relationships, all that good fun stuff. This is our shameless, why should you contact us? Because we're wonderful. And, well, that's enough said about that. And we actually have three practices, as we call them now. We have the Simplex-IT, where we handle the servers, workstation, and really the corporate strategic, the CIO level functions of IT. But we've also got these two relatively new practices, Simplex-DBA, which Doug is head of, and Simplex-PM, which Patty Smirk is head of. And essentially, the Simplex-DBA, we are the DBAs. We are the folks who make sure that the data is healthy and appropriate and secure and safe. And for companies who have, for example, vertical applications, SQL databases, but not enough to have a full-time DBA. We think that's a great presentation to folks who want to get more out of their data. And then Simplex-PM is for the project management side of things. The tools, especially some of the online tools from Microsoft, have gotten to the point where implementing a good, strong project management practice in an organization doesn't have to cost an arm and a leg anymore. And Patty Smirk is running that practice. And as we've said many times, we are at Simplex-IT, we are very dedicated to sharing our knowledge, regardless of whether or not people are paying us. And I can tell you right now, there are a lot of my peers who think we're nuts. But what we do is we actually have 4 monthly events. We have one dealing with Office, which we've been doing for well over a year. We have our Lunch and Hour, which we've actually been doing for almost 6 years. And we have, those are actually, you get fed during that one. And we have Patty runs her project management ones. And then Doug, and actually Patty has done 4 or 5 of those. And then Doug, this is his second on the corporate data. So these are some of the upcoming events, and these also end up on our YouTube channel. And you'll be getting an email when this one gets up online, and it'll include a link to that YouTube channel. So stay in tune for all of that good fun stuff. And with that, I am going to turn this over to Doug, although I reserve the right to interject annoying comments, because that's what I do. Doug?
Thank you, Bob. Hi, everyone. Thanks for taking time out of your day today to join us to talk about database performance. Ooh, it is one of my favorite topics, without a doubt. I simply love the ins and outs of it, and the fact is, it's everywhere. But let's talk about, why does database or data performance matter? Because as we're using our systems, if we have data performance issues, a number of things will become transparent very quickly. First off, it's an inconvenience. It's the kind of thing that distracts us from what we're trying to do. Now, if you're anything like me, you have a certain flow to your work. And being disrupted that way will take us out of the flow. Okay, more importantly though, it could have an adverse effect on our business operations. In other words, it might hamper our ability to serve the customer. It could be visible to the customers. The customers may be able to see our performance problems. They could log onto our website and see something like that, and it takes forever for them to get account balance. Bob has helped me understand many things in life, and one thing I had to realize, I think a couple years ago, is that there used to be a phrase that money is time, but very much I agree with the revised perspective on it now that time is money. We only have a certain amount of time that we can do things, but there's always the opportunity to make more money. So we want things to happen as quickly as possible while they preserve the integrity of whatever it is we're trying to do. There's also a new concept that's emerging now with all of the technology that surrounds us everywhere we go. That is situational data. And when I first heard that, I didn't know what it was, but I've experienced it firsthand, and probably some of you have too. Coming through your smartphone, for example. What that is that data that is performant enough so as to spot new opportunities. What does that mean? Here's an example. Bob was recently at the gym and he was walking around doing laps.
Very slowly.
His cell phone, i.e. computer, detected that he was walking in circles and it was not his normal daily routine. And what happened, Bob?
Well, essentially, you got a pop-up ad wanting to know if I wanted to buy a pedometer. So you think about that for a second. You have this device which is transmitting the GPS data up to a database. There's already been an organization that has entered into an agreement with Google, essentially, saying that, hey, when someone is walking in a circle, then push this advertisement opportunity to them. So it's this situation. The customer didn't engage it. In other words, I didn't go anywhere or click on anything, but by analyzing the data of the moment, boom, hit me with a pop-up ad. We've had similar, you see similar experience with people who are seeing pop-up ads because the GPS detects that they're close to a pizza place or the like. You're going to see a lot more of that, and the only way that happens is if the data is accessible in a very, very fast way.
Right. So let's take a quick review of what exactly we're talking about when we speak of data performance and why it matters. Data performance from this perspective is how quickly our systems or databases behind those systems retrieve the data we are interested in at that moment. In Bob's example, while he's at the health club, the system was able to retrieve the data so quickly it could take advantage of the fact of what he was doing at that time, and hey, maybe it turns into a sale. But often we have situations where the length of time it takes to get our data has an adverse effect on the situation, and we find that we're waiting and wanting and disrupted. So that brings on the topic of data performance is relative. It's relative to what we are trying to do at the moment. I'd like to introduce two simple little examples that most of us can relate to here. We'll take a very successful company, McDonald's, and we'll take a quick look at their data performance, and then we'll take my favorite company to talk to, my internet service provider, i.e. the cable company. Oh yeah, I get 50 megabits of data down, but sometimes it isn't that quick when we're going back and forth over the phone. So let's say that we're looking at rendering a report, the quarterly sales figures. I don't think anybody here really is going to have a problem with that taking 3 hours to run, because in all likelihood, the 3 hours is because we had a lot of sales and we want to crunch them up real good and figure out our quarterly bonus. Okay, in that case, waiting for a quarterly report, yeah, a couple hours is fine. But what if we're trying to figure out a customer's balance when they're standing in front of us trying to pay it? Now, for many of us, that does not happen, but in a lot of situations, transactions do take place that way. Some of the customers I work at, they actually have customers that are downstairs with a checkbook trying to pay. So what we have to do is we have to keep in mind the context of what we're doing. What are we trying to do at that time is the number one determining factor with whether our data is fast or slow.
So on this one of the things I want to interject here is that this is a business question. This is not a technology question. is when we talk about the need as far as speed goes, is there needs to be a conversation with the organization to set the expectations, to set the requirements. And in a lot of cases, that conversation, we found that conversation either didn't happen or didn't get the attention and detail it deserved.
So let's go back to the example of McDonald's versus the cable company. When you are standing in line placing an order or at the drive-thru McDonald's, you're not going to give them hours. In fact, if you're like me, you're going to give them less than 6 minutes before you drive across the street and wait in line somewhere else, because we don't think it should take that long. Now, when I call my cable company to either request a new service or to find out why this appeared on my bill, what you often hear is the same story over and over. I apologize, our systems are slow. One moment, may I put you on hold? On and on and on it goes. The reason for that is because their systems are non-performant. Does anyone know why? It's mostly because of all the mergers and acquisitions in the industry. When they first started out and they had a small customer base, their system was able to keep up. As we have these mega mergers that have been occurring across America and the world, though, you have many systems that are tied together, and we don't get the same results. Our data becomes less performant over time.
And one of the things that happens within organizations is kind of a smaller version of that. So you have a company that may have put in a database application back 10 years ago when the company was selling one product line or had one type of service or didn't actually let their customers access the systems online. But over the years, there has been just this addition of additional features, additional functionality. There's been these upgrades, but without regard to maturing that database so that it can handle those additional performance requirements. So what ends up happening is you have this originally purchased Volkswagen Bug that has now turned into this bus in terms of its requirements, but it's been added like a Rube Goldberg picture, with just these little pieces, and no one really is aware of all of the details that have been changed, except for performance has suffered greatly.
How true. And any attendees that are new, what you're seeing right there with Bob's comment is, in my opinion, one of the best advantages of interacting with Simplex DBA. Bob has always been very consistent on this over the time. He has a purely business perspective on technology. It took me forever to even get my head around what it is. But seriously, it starts with forget the technology. Look at the business need. Bob is a master of that. Okay, why do we get bad performance, poor performance, slowness? Ooh, we're getting a little bit geeky here. This is the world that I live in. Actually, at 5 a.m. this morning, I was transferring 37 million records to 2 different systems. And guess what? In my mind, performance was slow. So I went through this very complicated routine of attempting to identify it. But it started with these topics right here. Number one, it could be your hardware. Memory, got to have memory. That's where all the processing happens. The processor itself is executing the task at hand, whether it's copying data, retrieving data, or storage, our hard drives. Depending upon how old they are and what technology they are, they could very much be slow, maybe not so slow. The software is an issue as well. Most people have heard of 64-bit software, the current fashionable trend, but we still have a lot of 32-bit software out there. But when you step away from the hardware, when you step away from your operating system, and you look at the cause of many performance problems, what you often find is it's the database. Or I can tell you, being a DBA, at least I'm the first person that people tend to blame or come share their displeasure with when something is running slow. Now, looking at the people category there, often it's because they have unrealistic expectations. They don't know that that report takes 9 hours to be able to be received, rendered, accepted as an attachment in your email. And often at that point, they'll do the next thing, which needs to happen to prevent these issues. They will communicate that their requirement is far less than what the system is architected for. And in the end, what this means is it is the solution architecture that often will cause the problem. We could look at individual components, hardware, software, database, etc. But if you do not have an appropriate solution architecture, one of those being outstanding will not make up for one or more of the others being less than adequate. For example, the cable company has enough money to build very robust systems to give us the type of customer service that McDonald's does. However, when they buy someone, when they acquire a company, really what they do is they hook the billing system up. And not too much else happens. I know there's a phone company not too far from our office here that has 5 different systems that if you put a trouble ticket in, it has to pass through. And the people in one department know the numbers, people in the other department don't know the numbers of the other system. Very bad situation.
And here's one of the challenges that happens here, and this is especially true in the world of corporate data, is that we rush to solve the problem before we actually understand the problem. And, you know, it kind of gets back to the whole, when your favorite tool is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Every one of these metrics, so we've got little 8 bullet points here as far as specifics. Every one of those can be measured, can be monitored. We can address how much of those resources or how much of those aspects are actually being impacted here. And based on that, we can find out that there's one area that needs to be fixed. But in a lot of cases, companies don't take the time to do that. And you need to absolutely measure before you start solving the problem. Because if you don't understand where that problem is manifesting itself from, then why should your solution have a chance of succeeding? And that's a big aspect of what's going on here. It's a huge one, actually. Without measuring that for all purposes, there's no great expectation that your performance is going to improve.
Yes, measuring is the key to understanding and solving all of these types of issues. But instead, what companies often do is they use the periodic IT refresh cycle, meaning every 3 years, if you listen to the manufacturers of the servers, and we throw new hardware at it. And boy, does that sound good, because this processor is 240% faster. The memory is 800% faster than the old memory. But sometimes it doesn't solve the problem. That's because no one did the measuring up front. What is our true bottleneck? Is it the fact that the processor is not Gen 4 or Gen 9? Or is it the fact that we have a bad data architecture behind the scenes?
One of the examples that I use is, because I'm old, in case those of you don't know, is libraries. And how efficient are you at getting a specific book in a library? Well, it helps to know where that book is. And so we use, and I'm going to date myself here, we use card catalogs, or we use some kind of online method, cataloging method, to determine where it is, what floor it's on, what bookcase, all that kind of fun stuff. Well, the systems are optimized for us to be able to do that. But if we wanted to go find a particular color book, it's not optimized. It has nothing to do with the layout of the physical library. It has to do with the library isn't optimized for that type of search. But to know how people need to retrieve that data and to know from a business standpoint, that's absolutely critical.
So that takes us right to, how do we determine our required data performance levels? And it's starting with what Bob just hit upon. How long do we want it to take? How long are we willing to have patience enough for it to happen, and then balancing that with our budget. Think of it another way. How about from a customer's perspective? We have our internal customers, our bosses, our peers, etc. But most importantly, we have the people paying the bills. How long should they wait? Well, when I talk to the cable company, 45 minutes is a pretty good metric in their mind. They're very polite. I don't really like giving up that much of my life, and it does keep me from calling in the future. McDonald's has it down. You get about 2 minutes before someone moves on. So what we have to do is we have to decide at what point does the other interested party decide it's too long. Okay, moving on to monitoring data performance. How do we do that? Well, it starts with the business perspective on it all. We have to know what the problem is before we implement the solution, and that means we need to do some monitoring and measuring. And one phrase you'll hear over and over if you do any Googling on performance monitoring is a baseline. When I first heard the term baseline many years ago, I thought I knew what it was. But I've come to learn over time that it is an elusive measure. A baseline is a measurement of how the system should be running when it's at normal condition. Okay? How does the system run when things are fine? At company A, it might be that it runs at this speed, reports take this long, orders take that long. Company B, entirely different metrics. The thing is, our baseline is a moving target. And in order to do a baseline, we not only need to have technical skills, we need to have business knowledge about what is going on. Oh, it's the month-end roll-up going on. Oh, geez, the auditors are in and we're hitting all kinds of quick reports against the server for the next 3 hours. Things like that. Now, when you go ahead and you do monitoring, there are an unlimited number of geeky tools, and unfortunately, I can attest from this morning, mind-numbing techniques that you could follow to do it. But you don't have to. You don't have to get all caught up in the details. You could use what I learned back in the days when I was a financial systems auditor, and that is what we call the business person's perspective.
So one of the key things that we need to be able to do is we need to understand from the business person what are their needs and what are their expectations. So if we do have reports that are run on the fly, what are the needs in terms of what's an appropriate turnaround? If there are portions of the system that are customer facing, and customer facing meaning that either a customer is directly manipulating or retrieving data, in which case you really need to service them, because we've all been to that website where we try to enter something and we give up and we go to a competitor because their website's faster. Or if there's actually a layer, customer service rep, and the customer service rep can hopefully make us feel a little better by saying, gosh, our systems are really slow, in a way so that you'll bond with them and you'll put up with it more than you would normally. But by knowing what those needs and expectations are ahead of time, you know, we have 6 customer reps, we have 12 customer reps, they're handling X number of calls a day, we have Y number of customers who are approaching online, we have Z number of reports that are being run, and here are the requirements for those functions. We now have some kind of idea of what's the story that is happening at the same time that we're seeing the actual geeky metrics.
Right. There is an unlimited number of geeky metrics out there, and as you spend your life Googling to find out if your system is in compliance or in line with industry trends, what you'll find out is there's also an awful lot of conflicting information on them. One of our recent blog articles was on performance counters. They are a wonderful tool. Difficult to use, difficult to consume, but probably the most accurate way of truly measuring performance. But that's too hard, and you can't be running your business or running your part of the business if you're obsessed with learning what average disk bytes per second means, which I have spent time doing. That's why I like the business person's approach. Back in my auditing days, I first learned of that concept insofar as somebody could just look at a financial statement and know that the inventory number was out of line. I asked the partner in charge what was going on with that, and they said that They know that inventory is typically 15% of quarterly purchases. Great. We could take that same approach with our monitoring here. What we want to do is we want to start thinking about how long do I want something to take. As you go through your day, try to spend a moment and just think about that. If I had the ability to dictate how long this would take, how long would I want it to be? As I hit enter on a report for it to start to come up. That's easy to do. And the thing is, it starts to tune us into what's really important. And this ties back into everything that we said earlier. It's our expectations, which is going to drive our solution design, which is going to drive our system implementation and architecture. And it goes on and on and on. So just take a moment before you do a couple things sometime this week and just think about how long do I want this to take? Then look at how long did it take? And then finally tie it all together with, in your opinion, because that's the only one that matters outside of your customers, how long should it take?
And this is where it's a little bit different. In a lot of cases, especially when you're talking about larger companies and larger consulting firms, when they talk about doing some database auditing from a performance standpoint and all that, you're going to have very long-winded, very complex processes that go through. What we're doing is we're actually recommending a different approach, and honestly, we think is a more realistic approach, and that is, let's focus on what's important in terms of the business standpoint. Now, at the same time, what we do is we apply the tools from our aspect. We apply the geeky tools that will actually pull out the performance counters, but we know which performance counters to look for, so that we can then, as you give the business narrative of here is when we did these things, we can then look at the metric counters, and these tools are totally available to anybody, so you can do this yourself because you need a hobby. But you can implement those type of tools and then match the narrative to the baseline, and that will tell you then which of those parts, whether it be memory or processor, disk, the query, the health of the queries, whatever, you can actually see where those bottlenecks were occurring relative to the business function that was applied. And then if it's an important business function and it's suffering, you prioritize the care that you give and the solutions that you give based on what you see at that point in time. And that's where it's a little bit different, as opposed to saying, let's buy a new server. Because you may find out that really what was needed was just some more memory, or even we needed a new index, or we needed to tweak the query. But without the knowledge of what the system is going through, what the system is actually doing from a baseline, and without the knowledge of here's what was going on the business at approximately the same time, and without the knowledge of here's what's important, you're basically trying to solve it with at least half a guess going on.
Absolutely. And that's one reason that we're recommending that you start with this top-down approach. It's achievable, and it actually is the starting point. One thing you'll find out as you pursue database performance is another phrase right along with baseline is workload. Oh yeah, workload. Sometimes I call that the impossible task. What is your workload on your server? Huh? What that really means is what jobs are running on it now? What impact are they having? Are they slowing it down? Often systems are slow just because someone kicked off a job that's supposed to run at night, it's running during the day, etc. It requires business knowledge, and that's why it's so important that we keep that in mind while we look at these things. You can become totally encumbered with database performance geekiness, looking for performance counters, extracting data, staying up at night and analyzing it. But the fact is, you really need to know what is acceptable at your firm, what else is going on at your firm. Because there is some chance that the other activities going on at the same time, i.e. your workload, is having an effect on what you're facing at this moment that you're considering slow. Okay, very good. For any of you that were hoping that we would drill into performance metrics on a very deep level, please send Bob an email. I would love to do that.
He would. Seriously.
Okay, but coming up next month, we're following along the same track, the business perspective of data management, and we're going to talk about what is a corporate data review. You'll find that these all tie together, and they are a very good starting point for you to get a grip on managing your data. We all have more data now than ever before, but I don't think most of us really have information at our fingertips. That was promised to me 20 years ago, and I'm still looking for it. But getting a grip on our data from a business perspective is the starting point.
Okay, cool. Thank you all for showing up. It would have been real weird if it was just us. Hopefully this was useful. We would love to hear some feedback from you. Does anybody have any questions you want to put in the chat window?
And if not, so here's my question for you guys. There was a reference earlier in the PowerPoint to a movie. What movie was it?
I'm not sure I know.
Go ahead and put that in the chat window.
Go Jake.
Okay, Jake. Yay. Jake, I think you went ahead and registered, so you win a copy of Microsoft Office Professional 2013. It's that easy.
Wow, way to go. That's a nice gift.
Yep, cool. Well, guys, again, this will be up on YouTube probably by the end of the week. We'll send an email out to get our newsletters. Hopefully this is useful. We'd love to hear some ideas for more topics. And we'd also love to talk to you about helping you with your data environment or just your IT environment, project management environment, or whatever. So thank you all very much for showing up, and hope to see you at any of our events in the next month. Thanks.
Take care. Thank you.